It's been a busy offseason on Broadway. The Rangers have a new captain, a new backup goalie, and lots of change, hopefully for the better. John Chick of Locked On Rangers joins us to talk about that and all things New York Rangers.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On NHL podcast. Gil Martin, so glad you could join us today. And thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the show John Chick, the host of Locked On New York Rangers. And John, it's been a busy offseason for the Rangers. A lot of moves being made. Let's start with this one. The team has a new captain. Your thoughts on the choice?
Yeah, so obviously they go with Jacob Trouba, and I think, the smart money was probably on either it being him or Mika Zibanejad or Chris Kreider as far as, the next captain, whoever it was going to be. I mean, I guess you could make a little bit of a case for some of the other guys. If you want to be bold, you could have gone with like a younger player like an Adam Fox or a Ryan Lindgren, maybe even an Alexis Lafreniere if you really want to kind of, turn the keys over to him. But I think all along, those were probably the three most likely candidates. And, something that I mentioned, obviously I did an episode about Trouba being named the captain. You could have made a case, like I said, for any of those three players. With Mika and Kreider, I feel like there's almost kind of like a cancel out effect. I mean, they've both been there for such a long time. They're both such close friends. I'm not sure that either one of them would have wanted to get the captaincy over the other one, if that makes sense. I think they're perfectly content kind of being at that same level, probably remaining alternate captains and allowing Jacob Trouba to have it. By all accounts, Trouba, maybe not so much his first season with the team, but in his second year and also his third year, took on more of a leadership role in that locker room. And they were close to naming him the captain coming into this past season. But, Gallant was a first-year head coach, wanted to kind of, meet everybody, learn the team, see them interact with each other. And, I feel good about it. I all along was kind of a Kreider guy, but I'm totally cool with this as well. It's a good choice.
The Rangers making some other moves. Your thoughts about bringing in Jaroslav Halak as the new backup goaltender?
Yeah, I like it. I did an off-season series where we do kind of, a free agent spotlight kind of thing where we look at just any potential targets that the Rangers might have. And it was becoming pretty obvious that they were going to need a new backup goalie. The writing was certainly on the wall that Alex Georgiev was going to be traded, not because he's not any good. I mean, he's a solid backup goalie. He can be a little bit up and down, but the Rangers just weren't going to be able to afford him going forward. And, there's a little bit of a salary cap crunch there. And when that's the case, you can't really afford to spend too big on your backup goalie. I thought the Rangers did a really nice job getting 2/3 and a fifth for Alex Georgiev, especially when you consider that the entire league knew that they had to trade him. And as for Jaroslav Halak coming in, he was actually one of the goalies that I mentioned when we were doing our free agent spotlight episode, because, you look around the league and you look at all the free agent goalies. Obviously, they're not going to chase one of the, the top guys because they've got Igor Shesterkin. So you look at more realistic options. And I mean, there were a couple different guys that I toss out there, but Jaroslav Halak was up there as far as one of my preferred choices as a backup goalie. Again, keeping it realistic, relative to how much the Rangers were willing to spend there. Somebody that, he's bounced around the league a little bit. I think he tends to be a little bit underrated. I mean, you got to see him play for a while there with the Islanders, Gil. Yes. And, he's had a role as he's been a starter at times. He's been in a timeshare at times. He's been a backup at times. I think, overall, he'll do a good job. He can handle any role you give him. And, Igor Shesterkin is going to have to be Igor if the Rangers are going to get to where they need to go. But the backup goalie role has grown as the years have gone on here. The backup goalies tend to play a little bit more than I think they used to. And I think the Rangers got a pretty good one there in Jaroslav Halak.
You have an idea roughly what the breakdown would be? How many games do you expect Halak to start if everybody stays healthy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would probably be, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Whatever it would be that Alex Georgiev got last year, I think it would be fairly similar this year. I do know that Gerard Gallant doesn't seem to be a big fan. I don't think he did this once this past year. Playoffs, obviously not withstanding, but I don't think one time last year he played the same goalie twice in a back-to-back. So anytime there's a back-to-back, you're going to see Halak out there for at least one of them. And, again, I think you could do a lot worse than him as your number two.
The other big move this offseason for the Rangers, Vincent Trocheck signing a big contract with the team, 7 years. Your thoughts on that acquisition and where he'll fit into the lineup?
Yeah, I love it. He was again, we did this off-season series where I'm just looking at free agents and guys that I think could be a fit for the Rangers. He was somebody that I spotlighted in that as well, and somebody that I've just always been a fan of. He's been one of my favorite, non-Rangers in the league even before he came here. I just think he's got a great all-around game. He does a little bit of everything to help you. He's a good defensive forward. He can win some face-offs. He'll chip in offensively. He can be on the power play. He can kill some penalties. He's really kind of a Swiss Army knife. So I love the signing. I mean, once they signed Trocheck, it kind of meant that was going to be just about it. They weren't going to be able to, really go big game hunting in free agency after that point. I mean, he was the big game. He was the big name player. So that was going to be it. Other than that, it was just kind of patchwork and some inexpensive free agents. But yeah, I think he's going to fit in great. I think he'll most likely be out there with Artemi Panarin. That would be in the role that Ryan Strome used to occupy, and Strome did a nice job. He had his naysayers, but I think the Rangers were probably about ready to look in a different direction, and they let him walk. They let Andrew Kopp walk as well. Bringing him back could have been an option, but instead they go with Vincent Trocheck. And, a lot of people looked at the length of the Trocheck deal. Oh my man, 7 years, 7 years. The thing is, they almost had to do that to keep the average annual value of the contract at kind of a reasonable level, because he's got a good amount of money coming to him. And I think it's fine. $5.625 million per season. That's comparable with what both Kopp and Strome got. And, I think Trocheck is going to fit in really nicely here. We'll see who they go with on the right wing on that line. That's kind of been a revolving door over the past few years. But I'd like to see Capo Kakko maybe get a shot there to start the season. So that could be your second line, Trocheck, center, and Panarin and Kakko.
So training camp now less than a month away. What would you say is the Rangers' biggest concern at this point with their roster?
That's a good question. I think the biggest concern is, those guys that they all brought in as rentals last season, whether it was Andrew Kopp or Frank Vetrano or probably Tyler Mott. I mean, he's still a free agent. It's possible he could come back, but I don't see how the Rangers could fit him in under the cap. But, those rentals turned out to be just that, rentals. And they left. They made such an impact with this Ranger team in such a short amount of time. It's tough to say goodbye to so many players. Barely got to know them. And they were part of a really nice playoff run there. So I think replacing them and having the younger kids kind of grow into that role. I mean, the two that are obvious that have to take that next step are Lafreniere and Kakko. But you could also throw Philip Hedl in there. He's a former first-rounder himself. And also Vitaly Kravtsov, who, I mean, for somebody who's only played 20 career games with the Rangers, it's just been like a complete saga with this guy. Yeah. With him, constantly at odds with the Rangers and, Chris Drury and everything. And like I said, we could do a whole episode on that, Gil. But the long and short of it is those four young players, those former first-rounders, they're going to have to take that next step forward if the Rangers are going to, be a serious Cup contender this season.
John, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find the podcast, anywhere that you're listening to this. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, the whole 9 yards. I mean, pretty much anywhere you could conceivably find a podcast, you can find Locked On New York Rangers. As far as where to find me, I'm on social media at JChick17. And then you can also follow the show's account as well at LO_NY_Rangers.
All right. John Chick, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, man. We'll do this again soon for sure.
Looking forward to it.
All right.